Gold. What is gold? When we hear the word, we think of something sparkly and yellow. We think of gold doubloons on pirate ships, or the gold rush in the 1800s when thousands of people rushed to the American West to pan for gold and search for veins of gold in mines. We think of the crowns of kings and queens. Gold is rare, it's valuable, and it's beautiful. Did you know that we have gold right here in Michigan? Our gold is the forests of our state. Acres and acres of valuable trees we call green gold. Come with us now and see how Michigan forests were important to early settlers. Learn the story of Michigan's forest and how it affects our lives today. Now, imagine yourself walking through the forest. The birds are chirping and sunlight is streaming through the leaves.
Hey, here's a neat place. Let's sit down here. Let's take a little break.
Okay.
A nice place to sit right here.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of hard to imagine, but 12,000 years ago, there was a glacier sat right here. A mile-deep sheet of snow and ice sat right here. And when that thing finally melted back, and very slow, it took thousands and thousands of years for it to melt back, the first thing that grew here were mosses and lichens, and then grasses, and then trees started to grow. And when that forest came, then the Native Americans were here. And they'd have got along really well here. They'd have used this forest for all kinds of things. There would have been wildlife here that they would have hunted. They would have gotten sugar out of the maple trees by tapping them for the sap. They'd have used some of these saplings for their bows, and some of it could have been made into arrows. They would have used the bark of the birch trees for their canoes and to build their houses with. They really got along well in this area here, and they got along fine for thousands of years before the first settlers came in. Now, these first settlers, when they came in, they found all this forest, just thousands and thousands, millions of acres of forest. Then they used it to build forts, and they used it to build their homes, and they used it for everything. It was a pot that was just literally full of green gold. That lumber that could be made from these trees was worth a great deal of money. And it was literally green gold. Well, these new settlers that were coming in, they needed homes. So they built barns and they built homes. And they cut a lot of lumber, a lot of trees, and that led to a logging industry. And the lumberjacks, the shanty boys, they came in and they built whole camps, bunkhouses, cook shanty to feed the men, stables for the horses, blacksmith shops, saw filer shacks. They even had a little camp store in a camp. So in fact, a logging camp was almost like a small town. When spring came, they drove the logs down the rivers, but eventually the forest alongside the rivers was gone. So then that's when they started using the railroads to go farther and farther and farther back into the woods so they could haul those logs out to the sawmills. But by 1900, our forest, that pot of green gold, was very nearly empty. And people had to really start thinking about what they were going to do about their forest, how they were going to manage it. But hey, I think we've sat long enough. Let's take a walk. Let's go on up the trail a ways farther.
Okay.
Gee, what a beautiful view. Look at those trees. Look at this area. Look at the field. This was all forest all the way to the top of that hill and way over there. And while the loggers were cutting trees, so were the farmers. They had to clear land. What they didn't use for their firewood and for building their buildings, they had to get rid of in some way, so they literally burned it. Talking about burning, I'm kind of hungry. How about going and roasting a hot dog? That sound all right?
Yeah,
let's go. Let's go do that.
Yeah.
So back to the story of the forest. Forest fires were a real threat up in this area. And we think a lot of them might have been caused by lightning, but really they were caused by man. And it destroyed millions of acres. Destroyed homes and towns and people. The soil burned up everything that was in the soil. So not really much would grow except grass. Just very bad, not little fires like this, but literally millions and millions of acres burned. Now because of these fires that covered so much area, there were so many animals lost their homes. Woodland caribou, fisher, marten, wolf. They just destroyed everything, the fires. And fire, even today, is still a threat, but not near the threat because we have more modern techniques to fight them. But back then, no, very bad. At the turn of the century, most people were starting to find out that our forest wasn't endless, that something had to be done. So in 1903, two things took place. They created forest reserves out of some of the old abandoned forest areas, and they also created the Higgins Lake Nursery, where they could grow trees to reforest the area that had been burned off. And also, some of the areas started to come back on its own to aspen and some fir and some balsam and some of the other trees that would grow on really poor soil like we're sitting on right here. In 1920, the Michigan Department of Conservation was formed, and they began to really get a handle on how to fight fires. And one of the things they did was they put people in fire towers to watch for fires. At one time, there were 145 towers. Now, all we use are airplanes, and they have one airplane that's replaced, a dozen, 20 towers. Around about 1930, they really started to create state forests. And now we have 6 state forests that have 4 million acres. There are 4 national forests that have another 2 million acres. But you know what's really interesting, and a lot of people don't know, is that most of the forest land in the state of Michigan is privately owned. Well, of that privately owned forest, a lot of it's in the tree farm program, which is really a partnership between the private forest owners and the forest products industry. And that program does 2 things. It allows the private owner to manage his forest property, but it also provides the material that the forest products industry needs for building materials. And the neat thing about all of this, with all the state and the private land and the federal land, is that our that pot we talked about, of green gold, is more than half full now and growing more all the time.
It is good news. Our forests are in better shape now than they have been in the past 100 years. Today, foresters keep track of forest growth and health through the use of computers, aerial photographs, and satellite data. Most timber harvests are designed by trained foresters and technicians who decide which trees need to be protected and which ones can be cut. When done in this way, harvests leave the land ready to produce a new crop of trees. Foresters from government and private industry work together to make sure our harvest stays in balance with growth. Many wildlife species which disappeared due to a lack of habitat have now returned and are finding homes in Michigan's forests. Examples include the fisher, pine marten, and the timber wolf. Bald eagles, ospreys, and other wildlife once of special concern are now on the increase. People, too, find places to live, work, and play in Michigan's forests. Thousands of miles of recreational trails, millions of acres to use for hunting, fishing, and mushroom and berry picking are the result of good forest management. Things you should know. Michigan's forests were heavily cut 100 years ago, but they are recovering. Michigan now ranks 5th in the nation in terms of commercial timberland. Only 4 states have more. We even have more timberland than Alaska. Michigan has more forest land now than it had 10 years ago. Michigan's forests are growing about twice the rate of harvests. We are not running out of forests or trees. Because of good forest management, our forests support important Michigan forest industries, making wooden products from baskets to snowshoes. These products include guitars, a wide variety of lumber products, and papers. The forests also support a very large tourist and recreation industry that provides opportunities for you and your family to fish, hunt, bike, snowmobile, and enjoy our forests in many other ways. If we are careful with fire, if we make wise land use decisions and continue forest management so that we always have healthy trees to use and enjoy, you and someday your children can continue to work and play in Michigan's forests.